Jordan Bushell, Hennessy, on the Dales Report.
So we're here with Jordan Bushell of Hennessy, going to chat a little bit about how the world of hospitality is changing. Jordan has worked with Hennessy as a global ambassador and consultant across North America in the hospitality industry. So Jordan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Trevor.
So we'll jump right into it. I'm interested in, obviously, COVID is significantly changing the world of hospitality as we go through the pandemic. But if we look a little bit past the pandemic, interested in your perspective in terms of how is the world of hospitality changing, and really what does that mean for consumers and the cities in which hospitality exists? Like, where are we going with this?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of change that already needed to happen in the hospitality industry, from a living wage all the way through whether restaurants are dealing with a tip-based kind of compensation system or integrating that into payments. There's a lot of changes that way, let alone the different costing of alcohol. I'm in Toronto right now, big state-controlled or province-controlled alcohol purchasing here. There's a lot of price parameters that go into that. And then you go into major metropolises, whether it be Toronto, whether it be New York, whether it be Chicago, whether it be any of these, and the price of rent for these establishments is based on that foot traffic, based on that prominence. Well, if COVID is shutting down your ability to gather in large groups, then it's making those neighborhoods less attractive from a rent standpoint. And so are you able to demand that high rent anymore? Now, if you just look at some numbers like New York, 400,000 hospitality workers live in New York or work in New York. 400,000. All of Canada is 1.2 million. It's a massive amount of the employment sector for anywhere. And if you start challenging that from an economic standpoint, then you're hurting the jobs. Because if I can only fill an establishment to 50% or 25% or whatever the safe number they come to, what does that mean for my staffing levels? Well, I don't need high staffing levels. That means I'm picking my A staff, and I might not need that staff anymore that filled in the Monday, Tuesdays on busy weeks. Well, where is that staff going? If 50% of the restaurants are going to reopen after COVID, because some of them had to shut down for financial concerns, what does that mean going forward? Well, that means in Canada, if 50% of the hospitality is gone, easy math, 600,000 jobs are gone.
In Toronto, we have all these places closing, okay? The ones who are staying on to fight on, what does that business look like? What does hospitality look like for the rest of us? And maybe it's not even just Toronto. Maybe it's just, North America or wide. What does it look like when we're actually, the lockdowns maybe lifted a little bit? Are we walking back into the restaurants that we knew before, or it's a completely different experience?
A lot of numbers I've been seeing are 50% of restaurants are not going to reopen. You see, big names in the restaurant industry already saying they're closed and they're not going to come back. So let's use that number for sake of argument. 50% of restaurants are gone by the time we get back. Maybe it's a little bit higher than that, or maybe it's a little bit lower than that. Maybe we have 60% when we come back. But either way, that's a massive hit to our industry. So you'd think if we were back to normal overnight, you'd have double the amount of people able to visit half the amount of places. Those places should do really, really well. However, COVID is still there, and we need to limit those places to 50% occupancy. This may be the kind of the death knell for some of those nightclubs, but either way, the transition is going to need to happen, and you need different revenue streams. Some of them have found them during COVID, where they're doing a higher amount of delivery. Maybe they didn't deliver at all before. Now they're delivering more, and they're starting to see a larger percentage of that. But before COVID, that was 5% of the income of a restaurant. That was the cherry on top. That wasn't what you were leaning on. Now it's what 100% they're leaning on. What does that look like when we come out of it? You're going to have to make it a higher priority in your bar than the 5% it was ahead of time to make the money off the lack of capacity you can have in your establishment. That lack of capacity is going to see a number of other businesses go down because bars already had a small margin. If you're limiting your capacity, I can't see how they're going to run a profit on a limited capacity. On top of that, if they've been deferring rent as landlords were deferring mortgage payments, that bill's going to come due. if you've been closed 3 months and then you're at half capacity when you open and you get a bill for 3 months plus this next month of rent, you're going to see another 50% of restaurants close, or a number of other restaurants close because they just can't take that financial burden.
So then, as a international beverage company, how do you navigate this? Because you now are seeing a significant portion of bars closing, not reopening. Even if they do, they're going to be at smaller capacity, which means you're now limited in the ability to sell volume to these end environments. So how is a global beverage company pivot and sort of keep relevant and moving sales in this environment?
Well, what I would say of spirits companies and big spirit companies as well as the world, we've seen it a few times before. You know, the last recession hurt different countries differently. A lot of things are going to affect different companies differently. What spirit companies lost on what we'd say the on-premise sales were in those bars and restaurants. The off-premise, meaning the liquor stores or anyone that can sell kind of directly to consumer, have increased. Now, for some companies, it's increased to cover what they missed out of in the on-premise. For other companies, it was less so, depending on where your marketing was focused, depending on where your business was focused beforehand. As far as a global company, right now, we're concerned with how do we help those bars and restaurants that are hurting? How do we help those businesses get back to a semblance of their old selves? And how we pivot as a company is really just in the production and how we support. Where if we were supporting on-premise before and we were largely in on-premise during the COVID, we've had to go to the off-premise. Well, as we come back, it will be leveraging that support to help them.
If we're moving into a really economically uncertain time in terms of as you mentioned, a significant potential of people being laid off, unemployed, so there could be, floating past recession right now. What does that mean for your brand and your business if you're about premium experiences and premium engagement? And how do you sort of stay innovative in a potentially economically challenged environment?
That's a good question. And I think staying innovative in an economically challenging environment is one of those areas where we've seen a shift in what was available to us. You know, where I would normally go in and host experiences or host education, host dining events, pairing dinners, things like that and that's a marketing push as well as an education push. Now that's been shifted to online. And I think what we're going to see coming out of this is more of that online presence to be continued and be augmented by the in-person events as we then use our in-person experiences to be a little bit more curated and a little bit more targeted. You know, we say, you either go wide or you go, narrow and deep. And I think what has proved well in the past, during the last recession, will prove well again here, that narrow and deep focus on individual smaller groups, because we can't get big group gatherings together. So individual smaller groups with hyper-targeted events and or hyper-targeted messaging to get into that. So whether, a 40-person dinner might be a 5-person dinner now, but it's a really cool experience, bringing a lot of elements together.
I mean, we were pretty doom and gloom through a bit of this in terms of job loss, culture loss, real estate loss, everything sort of hitting us hard and not looking the same when we come out. When it comes to the industry and experiential sort of things around hospitality, what is your sort of hopeful? Like what is one thing that actually excites you, whether it be from someone working in the industry or as an investor in the industry? What is one thing that you can still look forward to and be like, okay, there's good things happening?
As an investor in this industry, I would look at it, and we've got great comparison from 2008, which was more of a financial crisis, and now we've got a medical pandemic, and yet alcohol was pretty solid throughout that, because it is it's a comfort thing. People they like that relaxation of taking a sip of something, to enjoy yourself. It's a semblance of normalcy. If you can't go to a bar, you can enjoy, a glass of wine or a glass of spirit or a cocktail with your loved ones in, wherever you were sheltering during this. And so you can see from an investment point that there wasn't the drop off that you saw in other industries in the direct spirit and wine and beer sales. However, from a hospitality industry, the hospitality industry in bars and restaurants needs to fix their model. And I think this is more than just an internal fix. This is governments for so long have been taxing heavily the restaurant industry through, look at, Ontario, and the LCBO taxes, 80% of a spirit price in Ontario is tax. So you're then asking a bar or restaurant to pay for a product that's 80% tax, and then you have to charge the consumer more tax on top of that for the government to leverage. Again, retail is already hurting. So commercial real estate, are you going to open a retail establishment in the place of that bar that failed? Probably not. So who's going to open there? So commercial real estate is going to get hit. Immigration, a lot of the immigrants coming into this country will work in hospitality because it's an easy shift for them to make money at all hours of the day so that they can be with their families and or go to school to better themselves or get their degree that was based in another country certified or shifted to Canadian law or American law or anything like that. And then you're bettering those communities. But without that hospitality, what are they going to be doing? Where are they going to be working? Are we going to see a longer time frame before they can start doing the thing their degree was in? Because they have to work for just minimum wage. There's no tip on top of that. There's a lot of factors that hospitality influence that I don't think we even see or will see the ramifications for months to come when we get out of COVID.
Jordan, I appreciate your time.